Here's the brutal reality nobody likes to admit. When an avoidant suddenly texts you after a long silence, it usually isn't because they deeply miss you. Most of the time, they miss the influence they once had over your emotions. That little message, "Hey, I've been thinking about you," often isn't a peace offering at all. It's a quiet test, a subtle experiment to see how healed you really are. They want to know if their name still affects you. Do you still freeze for a second when the notification pops up? Do you still reread the message 3 times? Do you still feel that pressure in your chest that used to happen every single time they appeared again? Because that emotional reaction is what reassures them. It tells them they still have importance in your world. And once you understand that, everything changes. You stop seeing the message as romance and start seeing it as a psychological check-in. They are not always searching for love. Many times they are searching for reassurance. They want proof that your emotions still move around them. And this is where most people lose themselves. They answer from pain instead of confidence. They reply too fast because they confuse attention with closure. They hand their emotional power right back in the exact moment they were finally getting it back. But not this time, not anymore. Because once you truly understand the psychology behind that message, you stop reacting emotionally and begin observing calmly. You realize the text is not always connection. Sometimes it is about control, and your job is not to chase clarity. Your job is to protect your peace. So in this breakdown, you're going to understand exactly what is happening inside their mind, what you should feel instead of panic, what to say if you choose to respond, and when silence says more than any message ever could. Sometimes the strongest reply is no reply at all. Sometimes the most powerful response is the one they never receive. Before moving further, you need to understand what psychology actually says about this moment so you can see every move clearly instead of emotionally. According to attachment theory, avoidant silence is rarely peaceful. Very often, it becomes a form of emotional control. The moment you stop chasing them, they feel something uncomfortable. They feel the loss of access. Your absence creates tension in their mind because they are no longer receiving the attention and reassurance they became used to. Instead of fully processing that loss, they often test the connection again just to see if the door is still open. Psychologically, this can become a control check, a subconscious attempt to confirm they still have emotional access to you. They don't always text because they miss your presence. Many times they text because they miss the emotional reaction you once gave them. It isn't affection, it's reassurance. It's their ego quietly asking, "Do I still matter to this person?" And the moment you answer too quickly, that anxiety inside them fades away. Not because they suddenly rediscovered love, but because they regained certainty. They regained emotional control. This is how so many people lose the strength they built during silence. They mistake a test for real change. They mistake emotional triggers for genuine truth. And by doing that, they give the avoidant exactly what they came looking for: validation. But once you recognize this pattern, you stop reacting from emotion and start moving with awareness. The biggest mistake people make when an avoidant finally returns is believing the message automatically means something important has changed. They see one small text, "Hey, how have you been?" And instantly their heart jumps toward hope instead of logic. They begin creating stories in their mind. Maybe the silence changed them. Maybe they realized my value. Maybe this time things will finally be different. But that belief is usually where the trap begins. Here's the difficult truth. Most people fail this moment not because they are weak, but because they genuinely care. When the message appears after weeks or even months of silence, your mind tells you not to respond, but your emotions whisper, "What if this time is real?" And that whisper is dangerous because you start responding for emotional relief instead of self-respect. You think replying will finally bring closure, But most of the time, it only restarts the same emotional cycle you were finally escaping from. This is the first major mistake: confusing their return with actual growth. Silence does not automatically mean someone healed or became emotionally available. Avoidants often return because they notice the absence of your attention. And when you immediately reply, you remove the discomfort they were feeling. You remind them that the emotional connection is still available whenever they decide to return. Their ego relaxes, not because they are deeply in love, but because access has been restored again. Think about what happens inside you. They ignored your messages for weeks, maybe months, but one text from them still changes your entire mood. Suddenly, you're carefully crafting the perfect response. Not too emotional, not too cold. You check your phone constantly, waiting for the next message. You analyze every sentence they send. That is not healthy connection. That is emotional conditioning. Your nervous system returns to survival mode, trying to earn closeness from someone who naturally creates distance. The second mistake is over-explaining yourself. You send long emotional replies like, "I'm glad you reached out. I was confused about what happened." Or, "I still care about you. I just didn't know if you needed space." You think you are expressing honesty, but to an avoidant, it often sounds like reassurance. They don't always hear the pain underneath your words. What they hear is confirmation. They still want me. They still care. I still matter. Your vulnerability accidentally becomes emotional fuel for their ego. The third mistake is pretending to be completely unaffected. Some people try to act detached by replying casually with something like, "Hey, everything's good here." They think acting cold will protect them. But emotional energy is difficult to fake. Avoidants are often very sensitive to emotional shifts, even if they struggle with intimacy themselves. They can feel when someone is performing confidence instead of truly living it. And even pretending to be calm for their approval still gives them emotional importance because you are still reacting around them. The fourth mistake is expecting consistency simply because they returned once. You interpret one message as proof of change while ignoring the entire pattern that existed before. Then, when they disappear again, you blame yourself instead of recognizing the cycle. You begin thinking, "Maybe I said the wrong thing." But the truth is usually much simpler. They came back seeking emotional reassurance, and once they received it, the urgency disappeared again. This is the invisible exchange most people never notice. You give emotional energy. They regain emotional control. You give attention. They receive validation. You offer vulnerability. They regain reassurance. And the avoidant doesn't always need to consciously manipulate you for this to happen. Sometimes all they need to do is send one message. Because every response tells them the emotional connection still exists exactly where they left it. And eventually, a painful realization appears. You realize you were not protecting love. You were protecting their ego. That sudden message after weeks of silence creates panic in most people. Your chest tightens even if you try to stay calm. Part of you wants to ignore it. Another part wants to believe everything is finally changing. But this moment is not about reacting emotionally. It is about leading yourself emotionally. Because the person who stays emotionally grounded here controls the situation. Avoidants often do not reach out because they are ready for deep connection. They reach out to see if connection is still available whenever they want it. So your response must communicate something different. It must quietly show that access to you is no longer automatic. The first thing you do is delay your response. Do not answer immediately. Wait, maybe a few hours, maybe a full day, not to play games, but to regulate your emotions before speaking. Most people answer instantly because they are afraid of losing the connection again. But emotional maturity is not instant reaction. Emotional maturity is emotional control. And when you pause before replying, something interesting happens. the avoidant begins feeling the same uncertainty they once created inside you. They start wondering, did I lose them? Are they finally done? That discomfort matters because avoidants are used to feeling emotionally safe when they know you are always available. Your pause interrupts that pattern. It quietly communicates that your emotional world no longer revolves around them. Then comes the neutral response. If you choose to answer, keep it calm, short, and emotionally balanced. Something simple like, "Hey, I'm doing well, hope you are too." Nothing more. No emotional story, no hidden pain, no nostalgia. Neutrality is powerful because it gives them nothing emotional to hold on to. Avoidants often expect either anger or emotional warmth. What they do not expect is calm balance. They will reread your message searching for emotional clues and find almost nothing. That quiet balance unsettles them more than emotional reactions ever could, because it shows emotional independence. It shows you are no longer emotionally spinning around their behavior. And if they become emotional or nostalgic, saying things like, "I miss you," or "I've been thinking about us lately," you stay respectful but clear. You can simply say, "I appreciate you reaching out, but I'm in a different place now." That sentence carries strength because it does not attack them, chase them, or beg for anything. It simply communicates self-respect. And for the first time, they are forced to face something unfamiliar. Limited emotional access. They realize you are no longer waiting in the same emotional position they left you in. And that changes the power dynamic completely. The deeper truth is this: silence is not what hurts avoidance most. What affects them most is emotional detachment. The moment they realize you no longer need their attention to feel okay, their entire sense of control begins collapsing. Because avoidants are often comfortable with distance, but they struggle deeply when they feel emotionally replaceable. That is why calmness becomes your greatest strength, not revenge, not anger, calmness. The calmer you become, the less emotional control they have over you. And once that control disappears, the entire dynamic changes forever. Most people think healing means getting the avoidant back. Real healing is reaching the point where their message no longer controls your emotions. Real healing is seeing their name appear on your screen and feeling peace instead of panic. It is understanding that your value never depended on their consistency. It never depended on their ability to choose you properly. And once you truly understand that, you stop chasing emotional breadcrumbs. You stop mistaking temporary attention for real effort. You stop confusing confusion with love, because genuine connection does not leave you anxious every day. Real love does not constantly disappear and reappear whenever convenient. Healthy people communicate. Healthy people remain emotionally present. Healthy people do not test your worth through silence, and the moment you finally understand that, you stop waiting for avoidance to become emotionally available and start becoming emotionally available to yourself. That is the shift that changes everything. Not getting them back, getting yourself back. Over time, they realize they can't really argue with it. It feels final, but still calm and respectful. You are not blaming them, begging for attention, or trying to over-explain yourself. When you create that kind of boundary, the whole energy changes. It moves from emotional chaos to quiet resolution. They suddenly understand that your emotional doors are not spinning open anymore. That calm distance shakes them because avoidants are deeply attached to unfinished emotional loops. And without drama, without shouting, you quietly closed one for good. The fourth move is strategic silence. Sometimes the strongest response is no response at all. That is not being cold, that is self-respect in action. When you remain silent, they are forced to feel something they usually avoid at all costs: the pressure of their own decisions. They look at their phone again and again. They wait for a message that never comes. They begin wondering if maybe they finally pushed too far this time, and for the first time, they sit inside the same silence they once used against you. Avoidants rarely fall apart because someone fights back. Most of the time, conflict feels familiar to them. What truly unsettles them is when your absence no longer tries to explain itself. That is what changes everything. Because the harshest response is not anger. It is calm composure. It is not silence used as punishment. It is silence used as power. And once you learn how to hold that balance, you stop trying to win the argument. You start protecting your peace. And when you finally stop reacting emotionally, something powerful begins to happen inside you. You start seeing the truth that was always hidden underneath all the confusion and emotional noise. You realize it was never really about their text messages, their mixed signals, or their distance. It was about your personal growth the entire time. Because the second you chose silence over emotional reaction and peace over panic, you stopped being controlled by the old version of yourself that chased love just to feel important. You begin to understand something most people never notice. Avoidants usually do not come back because of love alone. They come back searching for reassurance. They come back searching for emotional access. And the moment you stop giving endless reassurance, the illusion finally starts to break. That is when true healing quietly begins. Not because they suddenly transformed into a different person, but because you finally changed yourself. You slowly learn that closure is not something another person hands to you like a gift. Closure is something you create when you stop reopening wounds that were already trying to heal. And inside that calm, emotionally detached silence, you discover something much deeper than revenge or validation. You discover freedom. Because the real goal was never to destroy them emotionally. The real goal was to outgrow the version of yourself that kept accepting emotional confusion as love. And once you truly outgrow that version of yourself, their silence no longer controls your emotions. Their distance no longer feels like rejection. Their mixed signals stop carrying power over your mind. You stop checking your phone every few minutes hoping for emotional relief. You stop building fake hope around temporary attention. You stop translating breadcrumbs into promises. Instead, you become emotionally grounded, calm, clear, untouchable in a way they never expected. That is the part avoidants struggle to understand. They expect emotional chasing. They expect reactions. They expect you to panic when they pull away. But when you stay centered, when you stay calm, and when your peace no longer depends on their presence, they lose the emotional leverage they once had over you. And that changes the entire dynamic, because people who depend on distance for control often become confused when distance no longer affects you. Your calm becomes louder than your words ever were. Your silence starts speaking in ways explanations never could, and deep down, they recognize it. They feel the emotional shift even if they never admit it openly. This is why emotional self-control is so powerful. Not because it manipulates people, but because it frees you from needing constant emotional permission from others. You stop needing them to choose you in order to feel worthy. You stop needing closure conversations that go nowhere. You stop needing one more text, one more apology, or one more emotional moment to finally move on. And once that happens, something strange takes place. The same person who once ignored your value suddenly starts feeling your absence more deeply than before. Not because you became cruel, not because you played games, but because your energy changed. Your attention became unavailable. Your emotional dependence disappeared. And people always notice when they no longer have easy access to someone who once cared deeply. But by then, your focus is different. You are no longer trying to make them understand your pain. You are no longer trying to convince someone to meet your emotional needs. You are no longer exhausting yourself trying to earn consistency from someone committed to emotional distance. Instead, you begin rebuilding yourself quietly, day by day, thought by thought, boundary by boundary, and that process changes you more than any relationship ever could. You become more selective with your energy, more careful with your trust, more aware of emotional patterns that once pulled you into confusion. You stop romanticizing inconsistency. You stop excusing emotional unavailability. You stop calling anxiety love and instability chemistry. And for the first time in a long time, your nervous system starts feeling safe again. That safety becomes addictive in the best possible way. Peace becomes more attractive than emotional chaos. Clarity becomes more valuable than temporary attention. And suddenly, you no longer miss people the same way, because you finally understand that missing someone does not always mean they were good for you. Sometimes you only miss the hope, the fantasy, the emotional addiction to being chosen. And when that truth fully sinks in, you stop chasing closure from people who were never emotionally equipped to give it. You stop abandoning yourself just to keep someone else comfortable. You stop shrinking your standards to maintain temporary connection. That is real power, not forcing someone to stay, not making someone regret losing you, not proving your worth through suffering. Real power is remaining emotionally steady even when someone fails to give you what you deserved. Real power is protecting your peace without needing applause for it. Real power is walking away without turning bitter.